There we go. All right. As we formally begin, I want to take a moment to offer a land acknowledgement as a time of reflection to recognize and offer respect to Indigenous lands, treaties, and peoples. While today we meet virtually, the University of Toronto operates on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I am very pleased to introduce you all today to our presenter, Jodi Gorham. Jodi is a registered social worker, child and youth counselor, circle facilitator, Reiki master, and the founder and managing director of JAG Village. She is a wife and mother of two children, Davis, who she holds in her arms, and Georgia, who she now holds in her heart. With over 20 years of professional experience in mental health, along with her personal experiences with trauma and grief, Jodi is passionate about honoring and supporting people of all ages. And so, on that note, I will pass things over to you, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's joining us in this room today. I appreciate the time and space that you're creating for either growing your own grief literacy or supporting grief literacy in your communities, whatever you're here for. Um, can I move the slides? I don't think so. Okay, there we go. So I'd like to share our agenda. We're going to start. Anybody who's sat with me in any sort of capacity knows that I usually start with a brave space. I like to invite, I'll do a little bit more on the next slide, but the brave space idea of paralleling what those of us that live with grief live, that you have to be willing to be brave and vulnerable in order to support those who are also living brave and vulnerable things. We're going to talk a little bit about what grief literacy is and have maybe sort of a deeper understanding through the adult bereavement care pyramid. Talk about compassionate communities and building those communities. And then talk a little bit about what is grief support and what sort of more leans into grief therapy. And then we want to showcase our program a little bit based on some feedback that we've had before, as people want to know what's actually in the program. So I have to start off. Oh, yes, I have to start off with sharing our team. Karima and Mark and myself are the three different facilitators. We each do different courses. Mind you, we've each sort of taught each other's as well, just to be able to build on each other's work. We are all super excited that we feel like we have sort of a one-of-a-kind program, that we really focus on promoting grief literacy. And although Kareem and I are both social workers, Mark is a psychotherapist with his background is in thantology, so the study of death and dying and bereavement. And so the three of us sort of walk alongside of people on this journey, and we're so thrilled to have everybody a part of this. So as we walk forward in this webinar today, I invite you to ask as many questions as you would like. We'll try and get to all of them. What we often sort of giggle at a little bit is this usually opens doors to lots of questions, and we only have an hour. And part of this is like, join us for the whole program if you want. And we're looking at building a community of practice where you can stay involved if you do become a part of our program. And so it could be a lifelong learning space for all of us. I want to acknowledge that all wisdom in this space is acknowledged, and I'm grateful for. I realize I bring in some knowledge and some lived experience, but I'm guessing most of you do as well. I ask that we do self-reflection. What are we bringing into this space? And lots and lots of grief work is about unlearning. So it's not just about learning something new. It might be about unpacking and unlearning things that you thought you knew. So, can I have an idea if people just want to put in the chat what people's interests are, if they're here personally, professionally? Um, so if I end up going off script at all, I can kind of cater to some of those. Both, both. Yeah. I feel like many of us end up in the professional world of this because it's chosen us. So we often do have both a personal and professional. Look at all of you. That's amazing. Incredible. Amazing. Okay. So when we speak about grief literacy, we're talking about having more of a collective understanding of grief, understanding that it's multifaceted, meaning it's an individual process. So the way in which one person experiences it is unique to them. So even though grief is very universal and at all points of in some point in your life, everybody will experience grief. How we experience grief is based on our own individual process, what through emotional, social, physical, and spiritual, but also by a lot of the social determinants around us and the support that we have. So when we are increasing our grief literacy, we're looking for building community that can support grieving individuals, also sort of reduce some of the stigma that's attached to it, um, and more isolation. I feel like we're starting to move away a little bit from stigma, but we do live in a westernized world where grief is not talked about as often as maybe it could be. It's not acknowledged. And so we want to work on building people, individual and community capacity to be able to make space for grief. And then obviously compassion and informed responses. So the adult bereavement care pyramid is a model that was developed in order to sort of understand the different needs of bereavement care. So even though grief is any loss, right? This bereavement care is more specific to um, human loss, probably pet loss, loss of life. However, I think, those of us that are deep thinkers can probably apply it across other either tangible or non-tangible losses. So when we're looking at this model, what it does is it sort of invites us to look at four different levels um, and understand that anybody who is grieving needs support, right? All people who experience loss need some level of support. Um, and it could include compassion, understanding, and it might just be acknowledgement. But it's important to recognize that while some of us might only need informal supports, others may require more structured type services. So today we're going to go through what that might look like. So when we look at sort of the first tier, and as we move up, you'll notice it sort of tapers, meaning that, again, everybody sort of needs the bottom level, and then less people will need these services as we go up. So when we're looking at the bottom, we're talking about universal care, which is sort of that whole grief literacy thing that we've started to talk about. It's about acknowledgement, support, and compassionate responses. So at this level, the things we might see are that really practical support. People making meals for one another, doing other tasks that feel really hard for people. None of us can take away someone's grief, right? We can't take away the pain, and that makes us feel incredibly helpless at times. But what we can do is take away some of those other tasks that tire people out and allow them to focus on their own grief. Therefore, kind of healing ourselves and healing those that we're supporting. It might be things like emotional support, so listening and validating that their experience is their experience. And this might be like also other clear, accessible information that you can find, like Megan Devine has some great resources, how to help a grieving friend, a little like 3-minute video. Things like that are at this level where people are feeling validated. anybody can do this. Anybody at all can provide universal care because it's part of a person's informal network, meaning friend, family, colleague. Um, Even like I remember going into Starbucks and the barista at Starbucks being so kind and compassionate one day when I had a meltdown. So it can be used at any level. Um, and it can also be used by professionals because even within our fields, sometimes, well, lots of times, grief can be uncomfortable to talk about. So even whether it's at a doctor's office, we can all be using this. We can all be having posters or information that invites these hard conversations. When we start moving up to the next tier, we kind of refer to this one as people may be requiring a little bit more than just their own support systems. They may need a little bit more outside of their own environment. So whether that's because they have a small network or whether it's because um, they feel more isolated because of the type of loss that they're experiencing. This is where we're looking to kind of support people in a little bit more of a targeted way. These people often sort of have a real desire for connection with others that have had similar experiences. Often you'll hear in grief, you don't get it, no, you don't understand. And so like being in a room with people who know the pain um, can really not necessarily minimize your pain, but validate it, I guess. Um, Sometimes at this level too, it might be a more structured space to talk to someone, listen, and sort of feel understood. So this is where we might be attending like peer supported groups where like I'll give myself an example for a bereaved parent. You can attend and get one-to-one mentorship. There's often groups that you can attend, like through the BFOs, and attend those types of things where you're in the room with someone who's walked the path a little bit before you. So they don't necessarily have professional expertise, but they have lived expertise, which is actually sometimes invaluable. I don't want to compare it because I think it's different. And any of those of you that have sat in my classes also know that knowledge is gained in many different ways, and books and academia is one way, and lived experience is another, and all of that is valuable. So the knowledge and skills that people need in this level is still probably many of you in this space. It's being able to active listen and validate and continue to be compassionate, having a deeper understanding of the grief processes and like the things that people will experience. Maybe have some group facilitation skills or understanding of peer support roles and the ability to be able to sort of create an inclusive space, understanding that as you as a little bit more of a formalized support are still not an expert in that person's grief,
Right.
that person still carries what they carry, and we're here to walk the walk with them.
Yeah.
But again, most of us can do levels 1 and level 2, especially if you're bringing in personal experience, which I see there's lots of us doing both of it. When we start looking at level 3, this is when we're starting to look at where grief seems a little bit more complex. It's impacting a person's day-to-day living. Um, and they may need some more tailored sort of support from someone who has knowledge of mental health in general, mental health or mental illness as well, understanding how much this is impacting a person's life, and understanding the complexity of what's going on for the person. Is it the loss? Is it the loss intermingled in um, certain events in their life that have happened in the past? So at this level, we would argue that you need to be a professional in a legislated body, and you're going to be performing Ugh, no, I don't like that word. I need to take that back. You need to be working using different models that are supportive in the grief world. Um, Potentially doing some assessment work, um, and having pathways of where to go. So I actually missed on level two. Level two, it's usually nice, or even level one, that you know where you can send people when it becomes out of your scope. Right. So, we definitely have really great resources in Ontario. We're starting to build a lot more, like the Bereavement Ontario of Network of Ontario. We have Child and Youth Network, Canadian Alliance, and all of these places are places that you can go, and it'll show people where there are grief specialized professionals in the area. Because I will argue, based on my own clinical experience with people, that even people within our fields are can struggle with talking about grief, right? Like grief is one that people are like, oh, I do anxiety well, I do depression well, and grief, you need to go to this person. Um, and so if you are referring, having an idea of someone who does sort of understand it, because it can set people back when they go see someone and they're like, let's talk about the 5 stages of grief. And we're those of us know that live grief. Okay, they may be helpful context for some things, but we definitely don't go through any linear sort of process. Um, Also, at this level, you're likely looking at there could be multidisciplinary teams where there's different sort of professionals that can support, even if it's not at the front line, that uh, the professional can get support from someone who has the skills. Um, and then at this level, you would want to have an understanding of trauma and loss to be able to potentially move up to level four. Um, to be able to see if someone is having sort of that now acute complex needs. So at this stage, or this time in people's life, you're looking for people who are really struggling, either doing things they want to be doing or things that they have to be doing. And this is where you're looking probably for more of a professional. And then we move into level four when the disruption is impacting health significantly, their health or the health of others that are around them. And then you're likely looking at some sort of people living with diagnosis in this area, or there's a lot of in the work we talk about prolonged grief disorder in this model. There's a lot of tensions in the field about um, grief being a disorder. um, the two tensions being sort of on the side of, we live in a world where pathology require supports require pathology in order to access certain medical professionals. In order for certain medical professionals to be paid, there needs to be a pathology component, and yet grief is a natural and normal response to loss. So where do those things fit? But at this level, we're looking at very specialized therapeutic interventions. Again, it might be a specialist within the field. However, it can also be more psychiatrist if medication needs to be a part, or psychology if diagnostic things need to happen in order for people to take time off work, or those kind of things. Um, you're definitely looking at the higher risk populations for needing sort of level four are often those people who experience some sort of stigmatized loss, so suicides, murders, opiate or drug losses, and child loss, out of order death. Those are all things that could put people at higher risk for needing a little bit more support than just family and friends and people that have walked the walk before. Okay, I think we can go on the next one. So as a social worker, this is sort of more my like area of like things that I like to consider because, when we talk about things, certain losses, or again, when we look at things in sort of steps or levels, we go into this like way of looking that everyone is on an equal playing field, which we know is not necessarily true, right? And so we want to look at which could impact why people may be at higher risk or at lower risk or be able to manage in like the lower levels can be based on some of these other things. So our social networks, right? Um, if family, friends, if people have a lot of family and friends who are able to talk about grief and loss in a way that's helpful, because I also need to put in there people can be surrounded by a lot of people. But unless those people are compassionate and understand grief and loss, the person themselves may not actually find their help helpful, right? So again, in grief literacy, the help has to be perceived as helpful by the person living it. So this could mean that, whether there is people and they don't have some of this knowledge, or whether there isn't people, it can complicate things. What else do I have here? The circumstances of the loss. And again, when I speak about the circumstances, I want to speak on like a really broad spectrum of the idea that, you know, sudden versus expected doesn't necessarily make it easier for anyone. Because if you talk to people who live loss, sudden can be awful for a lot of reasons, and watching somebody suffer can also cause lots of problems. So there isn't necessarily one worse than the other. It's being aware of how how those factors are impacting a person in the way that they're integrating the loss. Um, we might also be wanting to look at, was it a traumatic death? Was it a peaceful death? What kind of care the person had leading up to the loss. And I'm meeting the person who died as well as the people who are witnessing. A lot of complications that I've seen in practice are um, people not knowing that their person was dying, right? Like it wasn't explicitly said to them, and that can complicate things. What else? And then, of course, your own personality, your own belief systems, whether what you believe happens after someone dies, what your culture is, what your own personality is, how many losses you're experiencing at once. All of those things can put you at higher or lower risk for needing more or less support. And then if we look at how time plays a role in all of this, we're looking at what time in a person's life did they pass. So again, child loss, losing a child creates different complications than losing someone who's lived a full life. Again, not meaning that not both are sad, they're just different. Um, that how much time has passed since a loss. Um, and recognizing that grief can sort of like, we use a lot of water analogies in grief, but the idea that it comes in waves as as developmental changes happening for the person experiencing the grief, or when there's milestones that sort of come up. Um, and sometimes it's the unexpected things that come up. Like a lot of people will talk to me about things around, being that whole first year going, oh my gosh, I got to get to the first birthday. Oh my gosh, I got to get to Mother's Day. All of those things. But it's the walking into like the dollar store and seeing something that, or smelling someone that smelled like their person, that sets them right back into a huge grief wave. So it's recognizing that sometimes it can be expected, sometimes it's super unexpected when it comes in. Um, and yeah, remembering that it's not linear, that we don't go through a 5-stage process, that it's going to look and feel different all along. Lots of us talk about the first year being, when we speak about early grief, you're usually talking about the first couple years of grief, not the first year, not the first week, not the first couple weeks. We know that people get the most support within the first 3 months of a loss. If it's a complicated loss, you can get a little bit more. About the first year, people are pretty supported, and then the westernized culture kind of says it's time to move on, and that's when people can really start feeling the isolation because they're not just looking for that next. They're not just living moment to moment anymore. They're like, this is life, and this is the time support has started to like people live their life, the world keeps turning, and so that isolation can come in again. So keeping all of those things in mind, so somebody may be fine with just having family support at some point, and then as something happens in their life, they could need more for bits and pieces of time. So recognizing that this again is sort of like it's not you move up and then move back down. It's like constantly you're going to need what you need, and you build yourself a team. When we start looking at culture and power and privilege, those sorts of things, we know that depending where you live, we know that all the isms play a role in people accessing support if support has been historically not great. So I guess I'm getting into structural and government systems as well here, but we know that certain people don't ask for help more because helpers have been oppressive in the past. We know that our structural systems aren't very good for supporting grief and bereavement. So if somebody's had a loss and their work has no bereavement policy and is expecting them to go back to work 9 to 5 every day in an office, um, that might complicate things for certain people, especially if they have a family who's also grieving. Um, yeah, and different cultures experience grief and bereavement very differently. Some talk, some say names, some don't say names. There's periods of mourning that need to occur. All of those things that can make things a little bit more or less complex. Okay, so that was a lot. And I wanted to do some like figuring out where we think people might be in discussions. But before I give out a few scenarios, I'm just wondering if there's any questions or any comments that um, people would like to add or share. Either like you can put up your hand or uh, unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with, or not at all. Oh my gosh, I lost my screen. Now it's all super huge. I don't like this one. Exit full screen. Okay, so everybody's still with me? No questions? No comments? Okay. So let's sort of go through a couple examples, and yeah, it is a lot. And yes, the recording is going to be shared afterwards. Um, so let's sort of talk about where we think, and again, there's not going to be a right or wrong answer because these are like very simplified examples I'm going to be giving, and it might look different based on uh, where the spaces that we all come from and the lenses that we bring. So let's do Maria, who is 67, and she lost a sibling to a lifelong illness. She feels sad, but is supported by friends and family. She's found comfort in talking with her daughter and reading online grief reactions and books and talking with her friends. So we're just, if you just want to put it in the chat where you feel like Maria might be best supported.
Seeing lots of level one and level two popping up in the chat so far.
I believe keep going into how do I get out of big, oh my gosh, now I'm on there. Oh. Yeah, so we're probably looking at a level one. Does anybody want to share where they how they're making that decision?
Am I unmuted or no?
Yep.
Okay, so it's Barbara and Talent. So you were saying she was 67. She has some family and friends. She has some support. She's open to reading books and things like that. So she's sort of looking for services. But at the same time, I would want to know, how are those supports actually, like you were saying before, are they helpful to her? Are her friends supporting her in a way that is making her feel comforted? Or is there more to that? And then kind of at that point, I would say it was a level one, because you're just sort of digging into and acknowledging, where is that person at and what do they need?
Well done. Thank you. I was like, I just didn't want to have to do more talking, and you just did it beautifully. Thank you. Okay, let's try another one. Um, Aisha is 42, lost her husband suddenly to a heart attack. Her grief is affecting her ability to work and care for her children. She's starting individual therapy with a bereavement counselor to help her process the loss.
Got lots of level three coming in through the chat.
Amazing. Anybody want to share what you do know, what you don't know? Yeah, asking for professional services, disruption to daily life. Amazing. Could potentially need for, absolutely. Okay. Tom, who's 28, lost his younger brother to a suicide. He experiences intrusive thoughts, panic attacks, and has intense guilt. He is referred to a clinical psychologist for trauma-informed therapy and complex grief treatment. I should have made them harder. I shouldn't have said all the other stuff in the end. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think it's self-explanatory. And obviously, like the last one, just to sort of give context, we don't necessarily need to do it. But Liam, 35, lost a close friend to a car accident, is struggling with feelings of shock and isolation. Yeah, I didn't add in the last part, but there was only one left. Yeah. Yeah, you're likely looking at level 2 or 3, depending. It's an unexpected loss, a younger person. Um, if this person was able to access peer support, that might be enough. The reality, though, of and I'm sure many of you can speak to this too, of having appropriate support for friend loss. I'm not sure that that's readily and easily accessible. Like, there's definitely stuff for bereaved parents. If you lose a parent, sibling is getting better, but isn't even great either. So it really will depend on your area of what's available to someone, because um, I've had people come in who have lost partners and talk about how even being in the groups of like an older population who has lost a partner and a younger population who have lost a partner, and how there's still a huge disconnect for people there. It doesn't mean both aren't painful. It just means that they didn't get what they needed. Yeah, friend loss is a really disenfranchised grief for sure. Nadine Slate put there's not a lot of no acknowledgement. So disenfranchised grief is grief that's not recognized as often from the community, or even if it is, it's not addressed maybe. So like sibling loss would be another one because people are often asking children, "Oh, how's your mom doing? How's your dad doing?" And you're like, "I'm grieving here too." Um, yeah, absolutely normal to ask for outside support and skills for sure. Okay, so I think we better keep moving, please. Okay, how do I move back to? Nope. I can't see the slides anymore.
I am still sharing screen. Might there be a window minimized somewhere?
There might be. Let's see. There we go. Got it. Okay.
Perfect.
So when we're looking at key principles of grief literacy, this stuff we've all sort of mentioned, I've been mentioning all through along, is empathy and active listening. So the importance of providing a safe and compassionate environment. Listening is the number one thing you can do. People's grief needs to be witnessed, heard, validated. We need support to be personalized to whatever that individual's needs are. Two people can be experiencing the same kind of loss or even the exact same loss and still need very different things. So we want to look at personalization, and we want to look at holistic care where we're looking at the whole body, the whole mind, and the whole spirit and community. We can probably, yeah. So when we start looking at the roles of community, we're looking at how can communities integrate grief literacy to reduce that isolation, and what are the different roles of family and friends, workplaces, and other groups, whether it be religious. How can we all support that? And so there places can do it well. Lots of places, I would argue, can do some reactive grief literacy well, meaning that after something happens, a team can really get together and support, whether that be through emotional or social or even financial support, raising money for people, allowing time off work after something's happened, can provide information to their teams or communities about what grief is and what grief isn't and where to access resources. Maybe have an idea of who to go to within the organization for these things. But when we're looking at sort of a true model of grief literacy and building a compassionate community, we want to invite and encourage sort of that proactive grief literacy, meaning that how do people know that this is a safe place to talk about grief? If I were to bring up grief in this space, how do I know that people aren't going to run away? It's not going to be the elephant in the room. It's going to be the elephant in the room. But how can we make that elephant a little bit smaller? It's and in certain populations, understanding the higher risks of what might happen so that these conversations are happening, like even in terms of culturally and all the isms, like are people that live in marginalized populations, do those people feel safe coming to the people in those areas? So are we proactively giving talks about grief? Are we acknowledging loss on a general everyday sort of way of doing things, whether it's meetings or just validating grief that's happening already, so that we're reducing the stigma of grief and isolation, but also the help seeking stigma that comes along, that people like, I can do this on my own. Having community workshops, and empowering people to support each other. So again, doing sort of what we're doing today, in that recognizing every single one of us has a role in grief literacy. Some of us cannot do therapy, but all of us can do support. And we're going to talk about that in a second. As we start having this capacity and these social connections, instead of sending people like, for example, in my social circle, people are like, oh, you're grieving? Go talk to Jodi. Jodi knows that stuff. And I'd rather people be able to say, I can sit here and listen to you, but if you want to talk to Jodi, she's here. But I actually am comfortable sitting with you too, And that's the kind of community we're looking at building. These are because I wasn't sure of the space of who was going to be joining us today, just to go over our shared understanding sort of definitions. So bereavement is that separation or the attachment loss to whatever it is that you've lost. It's that period of time. Well, most of us would argue that time does not go away, but it's the separation, the deprivation of that initial attachment that you've lost. A lot, and it can change in perception and experience and relationship. It's when someone's attachment to something and they no longer have accessibility to whatever that attachment is. It can be tangible or intangible. So meaning it's a person that you lost. It can be friendships, people who are still living. We can go so deep into all of that. And remembering that grief is always a natural and normal response to loss. It needs to be felt and embodied, and it impacts a whole person. So we want to often continue sort of a psychological relationship with the deceased or the loss, in order to sort of like, so I often say, if I'm going to say it really directly, is bodies die, but love doesn't. And so how do you encourage these relationships still? And I also wanted to do a little slide on, again, just sort of differentiating, um, for people to have a better understanding of like what you can do. And especially if you take these courses, if you're a part of our program, you can absolutely 100% with confidence provide grief support. 100%. It's informal, compassionate, and it can be from anybody who has that ability to empathize and be present in someone else's pain. Okay. You're going to normalize grief and provide validation for whatever it is they're experiencing. It's normal that you feel this way. Anybody living with this would feel the way you feel. You're doing this in social, one-to-one, sort of community-based environments. You don't need formal training. It's your listening and your presence that's important. And your role is to help people feel heard and supported. And if you're feeling like, oh, this person might need a little bit more, that's when you're going to call on a little bit more of those people who have maybe some more education in it, more lived experience in it. So whether it's peer support, but when you're moving into therapy, you're looking at people who are part of a legislated body likely, and a lot of their work may be normalizing grief and providing emotional validation, because we don't actually have a lot of that in our communities right now. So this can often be what a therapist does, but also they may be starting to reconstruct meaning and integrating not just past losses, but integrating all the other things that have happened in their life. So, and understanding how that makes sense. So, for example, someone like me who's lost a child, well, all of those world beliefs that I used to have, like everything happens for a reason. If what you put out there, you get back. And that helped me through hard times before. That no longer helps me because, I'm a social worker. I put pretty good stuff out in this world, and my daughter still died. So that those things don't work. So sometimes that's where a therapist is going to go, is help somebody understand those deeper sort of meanings and how and deal with a lot of the secondary losses that come along with grief. It's obviously going to be in a more private and structured setting. And I often recommend, if it's grief, to really look for someone who's comfortable in talking about grief. I often have people come to me after they go to like someone else that they think is more experienced, and then they're like, "Yeah, I should have just came to you first." And that's not saying like I'm the best. It's just saying I understand a PhD doesn't make them a specialist in grief. So it doesn't mean they're not, but I'm putting that out there to people um, to, yeah, assist them in finding meaning again. And I have in here prolonged grief, but really there is no, um, there's no time frame for grief. I'm conscious of time, so I'm trying to go through this a little faster. Oh, look at that. We'll pass it over to you for a sec, Celeste.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jodi, for sharing all of the rich information that you've shared with us today. It's been so interesting, and I know that I've learned a lot, that's for sure. So I just wanted to take a quick moment. I am also mindful of time. We've got about 10 minutes left here, and I do want to leave a moment for questions at the end. But before doing so, I wanted to offer just a little bit of information about our grief education program. And so, as you might recall from our introduction earlier today, Jodi is one of our wonderful facilitators in our grief education program, which is a thoughtful and supportive learning experience for those working with or personally navigating grief and bereavement, as many of you have mentioned in the group chat today. So this program is made up of 3 6-week courses, which are fully online, and they're designed to fit into busy working schedules. Each course is asynchronous, so you can work at your own pace each week, and there is optional synchronous sessions as well for those of you that are wishing to connect in real time. The curriculum was carefully developed in consultation with leading researchers, practitioners, and educators in the field, ensuring that it's both practical and deeply reflective. And so up here on the screen, we've got the 3 courses, which must be completed in the order that you see them here. So course number 1, followed by course 2 and 3. We've got the dates for each course here, the next offering that is scheduled for each of them. But if you are wanting to learn more, I do encourage you to take a quick moment to scan the QR code on our website here. And if you happen to miss it, or if you're not a big fan of QR codes, rest assured that we will be sending you a bit more information about the program after the webinar as well. So just a very high level overview here of some of the things you'll learn. You will learn about theories and practices, grief, across the lifespan, social and cultural contexts of grief, as well as multiple levels of bereavement support. So the next course, or the first, I should say, the first course in the 3-course program, and the next one scheduled to run, is Introduction to Grief and Bereavement. So this course here provides key concepts of grief and bereavement, including grieving styles, loss types, rituals, and best practices for care. The course starts on May 8th with a registration deadline of May 1st. So if you're interested in registering specifically for this course, we do have the QR code up here. But if you're not quite ready to register, or if perhaps you have some questions and you'd like to chat a little bit more, feel free to contact us at oise.cpl@utoronto.ca. I'd be very happy to chat with you and to help support you on your journey. I do know that we've come up to 1 o'clock and that there's other places and things that folks need to get to. And so As we wrap up, I just wanted to mention if there's any further questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll try to address as many as we can in our follow-up email, which we will send after the webinar. But to each and every one of you, thank you so much for attending. We hope that this webinar was interesting and provided some good insights and strategies and tools for you. A huge thank you to our presenter, Jodi, as well, for sharing her wealth of knowledge and just honestly for providing such a wonderful presentation today. So thank you for that as well, Jodi. We do have a survey here about the webinar. And so if you do have a few moments, we do encourage you to fill it out as it helps us create more webinars and professional learning opportunities that meet your needs. And so we've got it here. We will include it in our post-webinar email as well. So on that note, thank you all again so much, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.